LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the May 27th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me and Chong, who wants to get down. Uh, I'll be using the 11 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, although actually there was no ABC this week with George Stephanopoulos, I think preempted by Formula One racing in Monaco. But anyway, I'll be using the clips from the other four outlets uh, for my educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. I'll also be doing some legal analysis on my main topic, verdict this week in Trump New York criminal trial. I will be going over some bad commentary from Fox News and uh, bad spin from Republican Senator Tim Scott trying out for being Trump's vice president. That'll be my legal analysis on the Trump New York criminal trial, but I'm also going to have a secondary topic. If you go look down in the video description, I have summaries of all 11 clips, and I'm going to get over to Biden's border crisis, as they call it on Fox News, and how actually border crossings are way down from their highs. And CBS News Face the Nation reported on that, and I'll talk about that a little bit in the last couple newsmaker clips. And then this weird State of the Union, State Secretary of State roundtable that was on Meet the Press that had something to say about uh, whether non-citizens are voting in the United States and how that is actually this big Republican conspiracy that may be tied in with the Biden's border crisis. And anyway, those are all the topics I'll be covering in my 11 clips. But I want to start off with my main topic. And for my political comedy, I wanted to show something that Donald Trump said talking to these right-wing radio show hosts on WABC, John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby. It's the Katz and Cosby show, is what they call it, I guess, on WABC. And Rita Cosby, they asked all these softball questions, and I'll tell you a little bit about how poorly they followed up on what Trump said here. But Rita Cosby did ask one semi-non-softball question. You said you'd absolutely testify. Why didn't you testify in your criminal trial? And I thought that Trump's response and just this 30-second clip was pretty amusing, which I will talk about with you a little more after we listen to that over here.
Mr. President, in the New York City trial, your defense rested its case without you taking the stand. You said you would absolutely testify. Why did you decide ultimately not to take the stand? Was that a hard decision for you?
Yeah, because he made rulings that makes it very difficult to testify. Anything I did in the past, they can bring everything up. And you know what? I've had a great past, but anything.
Yeah, they can bring up anything in my past. I've had a great past, but they can bring up anything. And he actually went on and on about how all these rulings against him were rigged, and so he kind of liked to talk about those things in his past that they could bring up. And also, he said, but the other reason I didn't testify is because they had no case. And there was no follow-up from Rita Cosby on either of those. Like, if you have such a great past, why are you worried about your past? Or if they had no case, why did you say you would testify to begin with? Because did you think they had a case when you said you would absolutely testify? No, they were just all softball questions from ABC Radio. But that was like the one hard-hitting question. And I thought that was sort of your your prime Trumpism there. Like, I couldn't testify because they can bring up anything from my past, and I've had a great past, but anything that, whatever, I found that amusing, and so I thought I would use that for my political comedy, and it's on the topic of the New York Trump criminal trial, which I will get to after I show the four news summaries, most of which don't really focus on the Trump criminal trial. I don't think they even mentioned it in the longest of the news summaries. This is the one from Fox News Sunday, where Shannon Bream, along with the reporter talk about tornadoes, which I'm not sure why that's the top story. Tornadoes in the Midwest, even though there is damage, it's because of the cable news bias for video of things that have been destroyed, because that's something they can show and that's sensational. But I mean, it's a big story for the people in those towns where it happened. I'm not disputing that, and I'm not saying their lives aren't valuable, but just on the scale of national news stories, the first thing, tornadoes, I don't think so. But then they talk about Taiwan, Israel, and then the 2024 presidential campaign in a way that is really biased against Biden and towards Donald Trump, as you might expect. Look, comparing their two speeches, they really downplay the booing that Trump got when he talked at the Libertarian Party convention, and it's Shannon Bream and their reporter. God, I'm trying to. Let's see. It's Mark Meredith is their reporter at the White House, reporting on all this. I'm surprised they don't have someone reporting from the border about Biden's border crisis. But anyway, I'll talk about that clip a little more after we watch it together over here.
Hello from Fox News in Washington. In your headlines today, a tornado touched down and crossed Interstate 35 in Denton, Texas Saturday, causing damage to homes, power lines, and trees. Just part of the severe storms that moved through Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, killing at least 5 people. And in Taiwan, a bipartisan U.S. delegation of House members has landed in Taipei to meet the island's new president. Comes just 2 days after China held war games in the Taiwan Strait, which the State Department is calling deeply concerning. In the Middle East, Hamas says it fired a series of rockets at Tel Aviv this morning. There are reports of rocket sirens in central Israel for the first time in months. No immediate reports of casualties or damage. In a moment, we will talk with Congressman Jared Moskowitz and Byron Donalds. But first, we turn to Fox News correspondent Mark Meredith at the White House. He's covering the latest on the 2024 presidential race. Hi, Mark.
Hello, Shannon. This week, President Biden returns to the campaign trail. He's going to be visiting the battleground state of Pennsylvania. The latest polls show him still locked in a very tight race with former President Trump, who's making an overt effort to win over black voters who Biden needs in November. Speaking at West Point's military commencement, President Biden vowed to continue U.S. military and economic support for Ukraine, even as its war with Russia stretches on for more than 2 years.
We're standing against a man who I've known well for many years, a brutal tyrant. We will not walk away.
But here at home, the president's political future remains uncertain. A Quinnipiac University poll finds voters are split, with Biden leading former President Trump by only 1 point, 48 to 47%, well within the margin of error. Trump, the presumptive Republican nominee, spent Saturday night courting libertarians.
I'm asking for the Libertarian Party's endorsement, or at least lots of your votes.
Recent events in New York show his campaign's growing effort to win over minority voters.
It doesn't matter whether you're black or brown or white or whatever the hell color you are, it doesn't matter.
The Biden campaign says it's determined to hold on to black support. Last week, the president addressed graduates at Morehouse College.
You started college just as George Floyd was murdered, and there was a reckoning on race. It's natural to wonder if democracy you hear about actually works for you.
Notably, the president's tone was far different from then-President Obama's address 11 years earlier.
Your generation is uniquely poised for success, unlike any generation of African Americans that came before it.
The Biden campaign was also recently dealt a blow after former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, a vocal critic of Donald Trump, came out to say she'll support Trump over Biden, who she called a catastrophe. The Biden campaign had been making very public attempts to try to win over Haley's supporters. Shannon.
So, Mark, while you're there at the White House, I have a foreign policy question as well. The issue of Israel, the Biden administration, what are they saying now about the pushback on the ICC, the warrants issued, not only against leaders of Hamas, but Israeli leaders as well?
The White House has been quite outspoken about this. The president has been calling these arrest warrants for Israeli leaders outrageous, and now the administration is even saying it's open to possibly sanctioning the ICC down the line. Shannon.
Okay, Mark Meredith reporting from the White House. Mark, thank you very much. Joining us now, Florida Democratic Congressman Jared Moskowitz.
And I'm not going to have a clip of Jared Moskowitz, the Democrat or the Republican who were on the program, because Shannon Bream did not discuss the New York criminal trial with either of them. You saw it also didn't make the news summary there, which I discussed some of the bias before I showed that clip. A couple other ones I noticed I had forgotten to mention. When Mark Meredith showed the Quinnipiac poll where Biden was leading Trump, he mentioned, but just by 1 point and within the margin of error. Like, they never mention the margin of error when they have Trump leading in the polls. And even if it's by 1 point. So that was one of the biases there. And they specifically tried to make Biden look bad in comparison to Obama, and whether he had, the more hopeful message that Biden had a less hopeful message for the Morehouse College graduates than Biden did years ago. But, the world has changed somewhat since Obama was president. There's been the whole Trump backlash. We went through George Floyd and the pandemic, and I don't know that. Anyway, that was some of the other bias in the Fox News Sunday news summary, as you would expect from a channel that's not really a news channel, but is actually a propaganda outlet of the Republican Party, as I've discussed so many times before. But I'm going to get to the next news summary from NBC News Meet the Press. And like I said earlier, they had this roundtable of secretaries of state from 4 different states. And I'm going to have a clip of that as my final clip, where you have some of the Democrats pushing back a little on Brad Raffensperger from the Secretary of State of Georgia on this whole idea of non-citizens voting. But my big criticism of Meet the Press is something I've mentioned a bunch of times over the years, is that I get the feeling on some holidays that they, and Chuck Todd seemed to do this a lot, but I think Kristen Welker does as well, where they've pre-recorded the whole thing so they can take the long weekend off. Or I'm not sure that any of this was recorded before Thursday or after Thursday or Friday. I don't think it was necessarily on the weekend, and they never mentioned the New York criminal trial of Donald Trump. They had this special theme edition of Democracy Under Threat in the 2024 election, and that's why they had the secretaries of state from these 4 different states. By the way, NBC News Meet the Press uploads their entire episode to the NBC News YouTube channel. I put a link to the May 26th edition that you can watch the whole thing if you want. But here's the news summary from the beginning that I've kind of pre-criticized again before we watch it over here.
Good Sunday morning. In just over 5 months, voters will decide a presidential election with stakes that could not be higher, for issues from the economy and abortion to immigration, foreign policy, and the Supreme Court. Voters will pick 11 governors, 34 U.S. senators, 435 members of the House, decide dozens of statewide ballot measures, and choose thousands of state and local officials. But in the midst of an historic election, 81% of voters across party lines say democracy in America is under threat. Nearly a third of voters feel so strongly about it that they say they will vote for or against a candidate on the issue, regardless of that candidate's stand on other issues. For months, President Biden has tried to put democracy on the ballot.
Not since President Lincoln and the Civil War have freedom and democracy been under assault at home as they are today.
Former President Trump, who is charged with 14 felony counts related to efforts to subvert the 2020 election, continues to falsely claim he won and to warn his supporters not to trust the 2024 results.
Keep your eyes open. Watch the cheating. The radical left Democrats rigged the presidential election in 2020. The radical left Democrats rigged the presidential election in 2020, and we're not going to allow them to rig the presidential election in 2024. The radical left Democrats rigged the presidential election in 2020, and we're not going to allow them to rig the presidential election in 2024.
Now, Mr. Trump has refused to commit to accepting the election results if he loses, saying, quote, "If everything's honest, I'd gladly accept the results. If it's not, you have to fight for the right of the country." That sentiment has been echoed by his supporters.
President Trump won 2020, and we cannot have a steal on 2024 again.
Do you think there's any possibility of Biden winning the 2024 election fair and square?
Absolutely not.
If the results come in and it says Donald Trump and Kari Lake didn't win, will you trust those results?
No.
Last month, a third of voters, including 68% of Republicans, told CNN they don't believe President Biden won the 2020 election legitimately. In a March Quinnipiac poll, a third of voters said they're not confident votes in the presidential election will be counted accurately. Half of swing state voters worry about political violence around the election and its aftermath. And nearly 40% of local election officials surveyed this year by the Brennan Center said they have experienced threats, harassment, or abuse just for doing their jobs. As Justice Department officials put it last week, those threats have been supercharged online by new technology like artificial intelligence.
If you threaten to harm or kill an election worker, volunteer, or official, the Justice Department will find you. The public servants who administer our elections must be able to do their jobs without fearing for their safety or that of their families.
And joining me now for a bipartisan conversation on how to safeguard democracy in 2024 are 4 chief election officials from battleground states.
Yeah, and the 4 election officials are from Georgia, Michigan, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. I'm going to show 3 of them talking about this non-citizen voter issue as the final clip, as I mentioned before. One thing I noticed, I looked carefully while we were watching that news summary together about my criticism as to whether it had been pre-recorded. They used a whole bunch of video clips of Biden and Trump and voters, and the newest, most recent clip I could find in that whole pre-recorded package was of Trump on May 18th at the NRA convention. And that's more than a week old at this. It was more than a week old at the time of the broadcast of Meet the Press. I don't know if the whole program was a week old, but that would be my criticism there. Otherwise, it's a good issue and a good theme and a good discussion that I'm going to show you a brief clip from at the end of my clips. Well, right before I get to the bonus Cheech and Chong the Kittens clip. I have an especially cute one, I think, for the end of the program to show you if you hang around that long. But let's finish the news summaries. The next one is the CNN State of the Union news summary that I think you actually hear more of the booing of Trump at the Libertarian Convention than you did on the whole Fox News one. And it also talks a little bit, it talks about Biden and Trump and the 2024 campaign, but with the New York criminal trial looming over it all, in a brief news summary over here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the State of our Union is, hoping you have a meaningful Memorial Day. Last night, Donald Trump did something highly unusual. He delivered a speech to another party's convention, which turned out not to be entirely friendly. As both the Trump and Biden campaigns worry about a third party, and they worry it could play a spoiler, in November, the presumptive GOP nominee tried to convince members of the Libertarian Party to vote for him. And the reception was decidedly mixed.
The Libertarian Party should nominate Trump for President of the United States. Whoa. That's nice. Only do that if you want to win. If you want to lose, don't do that. Keep getting your 3% every 4 years.
Looming over all of it is what could happen midweek, and that is former President Donald Trump's immediate future will be in the hands of a New York jury, with closing arguments in his hush money trial set for Tuesday on charges of falsifying business records that could even send Trump to jail if he's convicted. Here with me now is someone in the running to be on Donald Trump's on his ballot, to be his running mate, Senator Tim Scott.
And I do have a clip of Senator Tim Scott trying to claim that the prosecution of Trump in New York is bogus, that I will refute with my legal analysis as a former criminal defense attorney, along with this really bad legal expert panel from Fox News, which I will get to after one more news summary, the briefest one. I mean, I thought that was a pretty good news summary, and I don't know, do you think that they showed too much of the boos that Trump got at the Libertarian Convention compared to they mentioned that Trump got booed at the Libertarian Convention, but they cut off the audio in the clip they showed so that, no boos of Trump can be heard on the Fox News network. Well, I don't know if that's true, but who booed it best? Who did the correct amount of boos? I think probably CNN. But that's one of the reasons I juxtapose those two clips. And then finally, CBS News Face the Nation tried to strike this bipartisan tone on Memorial Day with this bipartisan members of the House of Representatives who clean up the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall for Memorial Day every year over in this clip.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation on this Memorial Day weekend, where we honor those Americans who died in service and reflect on what they fought for. Those principles are nearly 250 years old and are becoming increasingly challenged by political forces these days. Politics was set aside Thursday morning, at least long enough for a group of House members, all veterans who are part of the four-country caucus, to join the annual cleanup of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial ahead of the holiday weekend. We asked Florida Republican Mike Waltz and New York Democrat Pat Ryan about the now annual tradition for the caucus.
And that looks like that was a pre-recorded interview from Thursday, maybe, when they did this cleanup of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall. I guess maybe Margaret Brennan took some of the day off for Face the Nation. That Face the Nation also did not have any clips about the Trump New York criminal trial. Instead, I'm going to do this Biden's border crisis set of clips that you can see the summary down in the video description. But now I've finished the news summaries. You can decide which was the best and which was the most phoned in for the holiday weekend, which I think you can see at least in some of that. Now I'm going to move on to the really bad legal analysis. I've talked about this, how on Fox News, if you watch the CNN or MSNBC panels that are discussing the Trump New York criminal trial, during the days of witness testimony, one of the things I have to say about trying to guess what's going to happen is there's no cameras in the courtroom. You don't really get to see the testimony and the cross-examination. Reading transcripts isn't the same, although I've read a lot of the transcripts. And then getting stuff secondhand from people who are in the court, like how did it really emotionally impact the jury? It's hard to tell from the amount of information we're getting. That's why I've always believed there should be cameras in the courtroom. And we don't know the jury instructions yet. Because the judge hasn't released them. He's going to read them to the jury the first time they get released tomorrow morning or afternoon or sometime during the day tomorrow, and then the jury will get the case and they'll be deliberating. But with those caveats in mind, I think it's more likely than not that Trump will be convicted. First of all, because he did it. It's pretty clear from the evidence that he did it. And I'll talk about what he did after I show this next clip where you'll hear Shannon Bream say this thing I hear over and over again. It's, it has to be a to make it into a felony, it has to be a falsified business record to cover up some other crime. What could the other crime be? What could the other crime be? And after I show the end of this clip, I will talk about that at length. But the pre-criticism of this clip, well, I was starting to say CNN and MSNBC, they have panels where they have Trump lawyers, people who take the Trump defense side, as well as people who take the pro-prosecution side and say why Trump will probably be found guilty. And I think it's more likely than not that he will. But on Fox News, you'd never know it because they only show you the one side. Though here you'll see Andrew McCarthy and Trey Gowdy both taking the same side, that it's a bogus prosecution. That's like the only side you hear on Fox News Sunday. And the problem with that is that they'll either think if he's found guilty, they'll not think that he's guilty. They'll think it's it's the New York jury or the totally conflicted judge, because they show a lot of Trump saying that over and over again every day on Fox News. And Trey Gowdy makes the most disingenuous argument here about that, how the judge is so pro-prosecution, which, I was a criminal defense attorney for 5 years, many years ago, but it's still true now that almost all judges are former prosecutors. Almost all judges are pro-prosecution. That's like something that happens all the time, and most of their rulings favor the prosecution. It's just the way our criminal legal system works. And Trey Gowdy, not only does he say that, but he used to be a prosecutor. And at one point when he talks about the jury instructions, he said, well, really, I never really understood them and didn't listen to them. I was just like spacing out when the judge was reading them. Well, of course, because you always had pro-prosecution judges who came up with pro-prosecution jury instructions that you didn't even have to focus on. Criminal defense attorneys, they have to focus on the jury instructions and use them to try to get acquittals. And anyway, I'm kind of ranting in my pre-criticism of this clip, but that's because I'm going to talk about the actual case and go through a bunch of screenshots to show what the actual crime is afterwards. And I didn't want to spend my time talking about Trey Gowdy and his ridiculous, hypocritical commentary in the clip I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
The first criminal case against former President Trump appears headed to the jury this week. Let's get you up to speed with a brief.
Oh, and I also wanted to say this Bream brief thing is a new thing. Shannon Bream, by the way, also an attorney. All three of the people talking here are attorneys. And you're all getting one side from all three of them. They couldn't find an attorney anywhere in the United States who would say that maybe Trump was actually guilty based on the evidence. They can't seem to find that, but at least in this clip, they show quotes from some of them who then get immediately dismissed as left-wing attorneys or whatever, even though they're totally right-wing attorneys. And I'm ranting, so we should probably watch the clip together over here.
The first criminal case against former President Trump appears headed to the jury this week. Let's get you up to speed with a Bream brief. On Tuesday, the prosecution and defense will make their closing arguments to the 18 jurors. That includes 6 alternates who could be asked to step in if one of the 12 primary jurors is disqualified or otherwise unable to serve out their commitment. Following those summations, the judge will give the jury instructions telling them what the law means, how they are to interpret and apply it to respect to all these charges against President Trump. In the end, they'll have to decide if the former president falsified business records that pay off to Stormy Daniels, facilitated by the president's one-time fixer and former attorney Michael Cohen, and then falsified those records with the intent to cover up a separate crime. How's it all going to work? Well, let's bring in Fox News contributor, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, Andy McCarthy, and Trey Gowdy, former South Carolina Republican congressman and host of Sunday Night in America with Trey Gowdy on the Fox News channel. Gentlemen, welcome. I am glad to have the brain trust of former prosecutors with us to help break this all down. Okay, so all of us have taken turns attending the trial. We'll be back there this week. I want to read the analysis from a couple of folks who I think you could argue lean left. Here's how they see the trial. From the first day of testimony, this is Harry Littman in the LA Times, the prosecution has presented a tight, persuasive tale. The prosecution's cross-examination of Costello and redirect of both Cohen and Daniels were crisp, clear, textbook demolitions of the defense's points. Going into the final act, I like the chances that he will be found guilty. Lawrence Tribe. Having closely followed Trump's trial for criminally falsifying business records to deceive voters into making him president, I'm convinced he's guilty as charged and, barring jury nullification, will be a convicted felon soon after Memorial Day. Andy, as it's played out, the decisions that have been made, the rulings thus far, what do you think?
Well, it's a cogent story. It's just not a story that violates the law. But I think, to the extent that those left of center legal commentators are predicting a conviction, they may be right because of the way the case has been pitched to the jury. You know, it's one thing for us to be here pronouncing on what all of the various legal flaws are, and there's a plethora of them, but you have to try to see the case the way the jury is seeing it. And in this instance, I think the jury is seeing it through the lens of Judge Merchan, who has been very indulgent of the prosecution's dodgy theories here. And, you know, I could sit here and poke holes in them all day, but it doesn't make a difference because we're not in there speaking to the jury.
Yeah, it comes down to them. And what's so important are these jury instructions. It's kind of wonky last week as they're hammering it out, but we all know those are critical when you've put together a case. You then go to the jury. Here's what Syracuse law professor Gregory Germain says. Proper jury instructions will identify the separate legal elements of the crime that must be proven for conviction. Improper jury instructions will gloss over the legal issues and make it more likely that a jury who may not like the defendant will convict. So, Trey, what do you make of the back and forth we had over the jury instructions? What exactly do they give the jury by way of making a decision?
Well, I'm in a little bit of a minority here. I've sat through 100 different judges giving jury instructions to the jury, and half the time I didn't know what he or she was talking about. They're incredibly complicated. Lawyers have a hard time following them. I know there are 2 lawyers on this jury, but ordinarily there are no lawyers on a jury. I think what jurors usually do is they go with their, quote, common sense. They go with their intuition. They say, do we think, are we pretty sure this person committed this crime? I will say this to Andy's point. The jury identifies with the judge. I don't want to say it's Stockholm Syndrome, but it's a little bit like that because they are at the beck and call of the judge. The judge protects them. The judge feeds them. So they look at this trial through the prism of the judge's eyes. And look, I've had some pro-prosecution judges in my life, Shannon, but I ain't never seen a judge like this. I mean, he essentially walked in and asked the defense, are you ready? And then he looked at the prosecution and said, are we ready? I mean, that's what I was in the courtroom twice, 2 days. And that's what I felt like is he was a member of the prosecution team.
Well, Paleco says this, to find Trump guilty of a felony level falsification of business documents, the jury must unanimously find that Trump falsified the documents in order to commit or conceal a separate crime. But the jurors do not have to agree on what that separate crime was, according to the way the judge ruled. So, Andy, I'm not sure that I fully understood an articulation from the prosecution about what that underlying crime is.
And I'm so sick of hearing that on Fox News. What is the underlying crime? What is the underlying crime? I already pre-criticized Trey Gowdy's not listening to jury instructions and then saying, you know, I was in that trial for 2 days and it was like the judge said to the defense, are you ready? And then the prosecution, are we ready? Essentially, which that actually didn't happen. You can read but that's what he felt like. And I don't know, is that really an argument based on evidence? I do kind of agree what he said about how juries make their decisions. He said they do it by intuition and common sense. I mean, common sense is in there, but I mean, I think juries do come to an emotional decision and then they look for reasons that back up their emotional decision. And it's really difficult to get juries to make decisions different from how they emotionally feel about the case. That's one of the things I was worried about earlier in my caveats, that it's hard to understand the emotional impact of testimony that you're only reading transcripts of or hearing people describe secondhand and how they felt. It's, not an easy way to decide what the results are going to be, but I promised that I was going to talk about what is the underlying crime here. Well, I talked about this back in April of 2022. I did a special media mix-up. I put a link down under sources in the video description if you want to watch that whole thing. But I showed way back then, this is the felony of falsifying a business record in New York. It's first degree when you commit the falsifying business records in the second degree with the intent to defraud, including intent to commit another crime or to aid or conceal the commission of another crime. So that's the statute that he's charged under. And what's the other crime? Well, Michael Cohen pled guilty to 2 campaign finance violations that he said in his guilty plea under oath, accepted by the judge and the U.S. attorneys in the Southern District of New York under Jeffrey Berman, the Republican appointed by Donald Trump. And at the time that Trump controlled the Justice Department, they took Michael Cohen's plea that he was directed by Donald Trump to commit these two campaign finance crimes. You can see the campaign finance violations are in violation of the Election Act here. This is from the summary of the charges against Donald Trump the summary of the charges against Michael Cohen on the Department of Justice website, where a single person cannot give more than $2,700 to benefit a campaign in coordination with the campaign, and a corporation can't do it either. So over $2,700 by an individual is a violation of campaign finance laws, and any contribution by a corporation. Well, here's what Michael Cohen pled guilty to in August 2018, that in coordination with and at the direction of a candidate for federal office, first they got the payment from a corporation that publishes the National Enquirer, $150,000 to Karen McDougal, and then in the lowest part, this is the crime for the New York criminal trial, the Stormy Daniels payment. That was $130,000 from Michael Cohen through a corporation he set up. So it's a violation if he did it as an individual, over $2,700. It's a violation if he does anything from a corporation. So that's the crime that they're covering up. And here's Michael Cohen's plea allocution. Here's the transcript of it, and there are links to all of this down in the video description. Your Honor, as to count number 8, on or about October of 2016, in coordination and at the direction of the same candidate, that's Donald Trump, I arranged to make this payment to Stormy Daniels in the amount of $130,000. And so that's a campaign fine. That's what Michael Cohen pled guilty to at the direction of Donald Trump. And by the way, 18 U.S. Code Section 2 says whoever willfully causes an act to be done, which if directly performed by him or another would be an offense, is punishable as if he did it himself. So if you direct someone to commit a federal crime, you are guilty of that crime. That was the crime that this whole system by which the $130,000 was paid off as if it was legal fees for a legal retainer that did not exist, instead of reimbursing Michael Cohen for this illegal campaign contribution to the Trump campaign of $130,000 to benefit the Trump campaign, to kill the Stormy Daniels story right after the Access Hollywood tape came out. There's a large amount of evidence that all those elements have been proven. That's why I think there's at least a 60% chance of, well, let's say a 58% chance of conviction. Maybe 68? Yeah, let's say 68% chance of conviction, and there is a 20% chance of a hung jury, 2% chance of acquittal. Because, acquittal has to be unanimous too. I don't think you're going to get 12 people to say that he didn't do it when he did it, and they've shown through the evidence that he did it. But it's very political and it's kind of complicated. So the chances of a hung jury might be 20%, might be 30%. That's why I was saying 58% chance of conviction, 30% chance of hung jury. 2% is high for. I'll be so surprised. I mean, it's not impossible. I gave it a percent. I didn't say 0%, but I would be flabbergasted if Trump were actually acquitted. And if there's not a hung jury, if there's a conviction, it'll probably come this week, verdict this week. The longer it drags on, the higher the chance of hung jury or acquittal, but probably hung jury. I don't know. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe he will be acquitted and I will be, I've been surprised before, so I guess we'll see. You can let me know what you think in the comment section. And before I leave this topic, I want to show someone who's being a total lackey for Donald Trump, trying to be his vice president. where you try to get where CNN's Dana Bash tries to get him to at least say he believes in the jury system, the American legal system, anything. Do you believe in anything but kissing up to Donald Trump? And basically the answer by the end of this clip is no, he doesn't believe in anything other than kissing up to Donald Trump over here.
I do want to ask about closing arguments in the criminal trial in New York. They are set for Tuesday. The jury could deliver a verdict later this week on 34 felony charges. I know you've criticized the prosecutors and the judge, but this case will ultimately be decided by 12 ordinary citizens. Do you have faith that the jury is going to deliver a fair verdict?
Well, there's no crime, so I assume that they will actually find him innocent. The only person guilty in that courtroom is D.A. Bragg, guilty of corrupting the justice system, guilty of not doing his job, and guilty of trying to frame an innocent man. It's really the two-tier justice system that has so many Americans concerned about fairness in our country.
But just to be clear, you have faith in the jury system, and in particular, again, these 12 ordinary Americans who are going to ultimately decide.
I know that 96% is the number I've heard, the number of Democrats in that area of Manhattan. So I hope that they come to the right decision. I assume that he will be found innocent. I just want to reinforce what I've said previously, however, that a two-tier justice system is one of the reasons why his poll numbers are going up. There is something instinctive in Americans who want to see justice play out. We don't want to see the weaponizing of our justice system against our political opponents. We want to see fairness, no thumb on the scales. If that's the case, he will be found innocent.
Well, I want to turn to a different case, a federal case, where there was a raid on Donald Trump's house because they were looking for some documents.
So yeah, there was no real follow-up on that. That was like the one question you saw. I mean, well, the one follow-up was, you even believe in the jury system at all? And I don't think it is 96% Democrats, or I think Trump got a larger percentage of the vote than 4% in New York City, and who knows? But even so, is it fair to say Democrats can't be jurors against Donald Trump? They take an oath, and unlike Donald Trump, they may actually take their oath seriously. That was my experience as a criminal defense attorney, is that juries did take their oath of being impartial and deciding based on the evidence and the law instructed to them by the judge. They take an oath to do that. And I'm not saying it's 100%, but in general, I believe that is the way that jurors try to act. And there was no follow-up from Dana Bash on some of the other stuff, the two-tier justice system. That always I mean, read this book here, The New Jim Crow. Read this book here, Chokehold. Read this book here, A Colony in a Nation. All of those are about the actual two-tier justice system in the United States, and it's not like rich white Republican billionaire white Republicans are on the lower tier of the justice system. Trump is getting like so much legal defense and so much better treatment than the average defendant. No one ever, well, sometimes they push back on it, but that is just galling to have a Republican claim that Republicans are on the bottom rung of a two-tier justice system. It's just ridiculous. And anyway, that is the last comment I want to make on the main topic. But I did mention that I want to talk about this Biden's border crisis issue that I see like all day, every day on Fox News. For some reason, they don't use the Biden's border crisis graphic on Fox News Sunday, which I guess that's their attempt to seem journalistic. But even on the supposedly straight news programs, like I'll show you, for this live stream, I just had to go back to Friday on America's Newsroom, which I had recorded, which is supposedly straight news program in the mornings on Fox News channel, and supposedly straight news anchor Bill Hemmer using their graphic that's been like all day, every day, once an hour, or maybe sometimes more than once. It's like all day, every hour on Fox News. You see this Biden's border crisis graphic, like right here.
Now, Border Patrol agents struggling to contain the growing surge of migrants from around the world.
The growing surge of migrants from around the world. Well, the problem with that is that border crossings have been going way down. Here's like a CBS News story. I put a link down in the video description to the whole story that tells you that migrant crossings at U.S.-Mexico border plunged 54% from record highs. Internal figures show is the title of the news story. And if you look at this, like back in December, there were like around 250,000 crossings just in December, and it's been dropping in March and April. In May, it looks like it may be down to 110 or 120,000 from the 250,000. That's the 54% drop they're talking about. And this is a time when usually crossings go up in the spring, and it has something to do with what the Mexican government is doing. It hasn't stopped the Biden's border crisis graphic from going all day, every day. You never see that reported on Fox News. They talk incessantly about the record highs back in December when it was almost at 250,000 people in 1 month. But the big drop, that has not been reported on Fox News. It did kind of get reported on CBS News Face the Nation. That's why I showed that CBS News story. It was something that Margaret Brennan asked both the Democrat Senator Chris Murphy about, and then the Republican Representative Tony Gonzalez. And I will first, here's the Chris Murphy clip when he's asked to explain this drop in border crossings and why. Is it because of Mexico, or is it something Biden should be taking more credit for over here?
I want to ask you about here at home, the southern border. Border Patrol apprehensions of migrants actually has been going down in these warmer weather months. They went down in April. They went down in March. Is that just because of the Mexican government? If it's a Biden policy, why isn't the president claiming a success?
So it is because of, I think, smart, effective diplomacy between the United States and the Mexican government. I don't know that it's permanent. And so I think we have to just recognize that without updating the laws of this country, without surging more resources to the border, we can't count on the numbers staying as low as they are today. And remember, today you have about 3,000 people crossing at the border on a daily basis. That's still a high number compared to what we saw 10 years ago. And so for many of us, we are just heartbroken. We're sick over the fact that our Republican colleagues in Congress continue to vote against bipartisan border security that would give us the opportunity to actually give the president the resources and the authorities to make this a permanent change, to get the numbers under control on a permanent basis.
You're talking about the bill you helped author.
Right. Yeah, and Chris Murphy was one of 3 senators who negotiated this bipartisan bill. I saw in the live comments early on, where was that? I saw something about James Lankford. Where is it? Did that message get retracted? I'm not seeing it. I saw somebody mention how James Lankford, the Republican, actually had to or ended up having a vote against his own bill that he had co-authored. But I'm not seeing that live comment now. I saw it originally, but I see a bunch of message retracted comments, so maybe I'm missing it. And he was the Republican who negotiated it. Then also Kristen Sinema, from the independent from Arizona who's retiring, she ended up voting against it and making this whole speech about how both sides are interested in theatrics. And then Chris Murphy, the senator from Connecticut, he was the third negotiator. And then the whole thing fell apart when Donald Trump said he wanted the issue and not any solutions. Uh, and they did talk about that on Face the Nation. You can see the whole interview at a link down under sources in the video description. The entire Face the Nation episode is uploaded on the CBS News Face the Nation YouTube channel every week. And then the second clip I wanted to show you on this is the Republican Representative Tony Gonzalez, a Republican who represents a border district in Texas. You saw Chris Murphy say that good Biden diplomacy with the Mexican government is the reason this happened. And of course, the Republican is not going to give Biden any credit for anything happening in Mexico. He has these like internal political Mexican reasons, although it somehow, I think if the internal politics of Mexico caused more migrations, they would blame Biden. So it's really not fair. And there's this one I'm probably going to forget by the time we get to the next clip. So I want to point out one thing Tony Gonzalez says that I think is really amusing, where he talks about how like cartels, the Mexican cartels, they're like corporations where they don't mind if they have a couple bad quarters, if they're going to have some good quarters after that. But it's kind of true, but it also makes you think, well, you know, those corporations, they're also kind of like cartels. But of course, Margaret Brennan didn't bring that up. She works for the corporate media. Corporate media would never say that over in this clip.
I want to start on the border. That is your district. How do the agents that you represent explain the drop-off in crossings?
I think a large part of it, well, first off, it doesn't have to do with what Joe Biden has done. We're on pace for 1.3 million people to come over illegally. The numbers are down. The explanation is Mexico. A lot of people don't realize Mexico has an election next month for this presidency, 9 governorships, and it's Congress. So in many cases, those that are running on security platforms are keeping the numbers down. But the cartels are like companies. So they're taking a loss in Q1 and Q2 in order to increase volume in Q3 and Q4. So in many ways, this is just Mexico carrying Biden a couple rounds. Now, if Joe Biden wants to secure this thing long term, I think he needs to stop looking at the Senate for a solution and look to the House.
What do you mean by that?
So yeah, and then they also talk about legislation, just like Chris Murphy went into legislation, but I don't know why I couldn't see that. But here, let me show you this. There was, I've for some reason when I'm like speaking live, it's so hard to like read and speak live, even when. But I did see the comment. It's Mr. Super Pat G. Is that what it is? Back half an hour ago, made the comment, the news barely covered the fact that Senator Lankford voted against the bill he authored. Yeah. Thank you for that comment. Sorry I didn't find it earlier, but that's what the bill that he co-authored with Chris Murphy and Kirsten Sinema, and supposedly was going to get like more than 60 votes in the Senate till Donald Trump said no, and then the House of Representatives said we're not even going to bring it up. And that's the way bipartisan immigration reform usually goes. And that was like the most biased towards border security bill that Republicans would ever get. And now they won't even vote for it. It's pretty sad. So yeah, that was the back and forth on Face the Nation I wanted to show, which was pretty good, even though it, like I said, might have been pre-recorded. I'm not sure if they were acting. I don't know when any of that was recorded. And then speaking of pre-recorded, I think this discussion with 4 secretaries of state that I was talking about on Meet the Press, and where I get this final clip from, it's 3 of the 4, not the one from Pennsylvania, but it's Brad Raffensperger in this clip, and then Jocelyn Benson from Michigan is in this clip, and Adrian Fontes, the Secretary of State of Arizona, are talking about this issue of non-citizens voting, which I think is kind of the flip side of why, or not the flip side, but another reason why they play up the Biden's border crisis so much on Fox News, just to, scare their viewers that scary people are coming across the border, and they always play up this migrant crime, even though immigrants statistically are less likely to commit crimes than the people who are native born. And another reason they're trying to play up this crisis it's Biden's border crisis meme so much, I think, is because it ties into Trump's arguments about the election. You saw a couple weeks back, I was talking about how the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, said it's hard to prove that non-citizens are voting, but intuitively we know it. And Brad Raffensperger tries to pull kind of the same thing, and the only evidence he has is that some localities have decided to let non-citizens vote in local elections, which is not like terrible if you want people to have representation. And in fact, non-citizens could vote in the United States all the way up to the Alien and Sedition Act, like in the Adams administration, but right at the beginning, and that's because they were like scared of French influence. But at the very beginning, for like the first 100 years of the United States, there were open borders, and at the very beginning, non-citizens could actually vote in federal elections, not just local elections. I don't know, but now there's very little evidence that non-citizens vote in federal elections. It's already a crime, and it's a red herring, I believe, as some of the people in this final newsmaker clip point out. And I think, and Brad Raffensperger, he's one of the people who stood up to Trump when he was supposed to find him 11,680 votes or whatever it was so we could win Georgia. But even like the people who stood up to Trump still buy into this election fraud myth that has no facts behind it. And well, you can tell me what you think after we watch this final clip together before my bonus Cheech and Chong the Kittens clip over here.
I want to turn now to something that's getting a lot of attention, efforts to prevent non-citizens from voting. We should note that it's exceedingly rare, and yet some officials believe it's an urgent matter, including yourself, Secretary Raffensperger. Why? And we should note it's already against the law to vote if you're a non-citizen.
Because I believe only American citizens should be voting in our elections. And I ran back in 2018 saying the same thing. I'm the first Secretary of State in Georgia to ever do 100% citizenship verification. And what we found was about 1,600 people that attempted to register, but we couldn't verify citizenship, so they weren't put on the voter rolls. So my fellow Georgians ask me, are non-citizens voting in Georgia? I can say, no, they aren't, because we've checked it. And then we've just won a court case, which came from the left, for the Coalition of the People's Agenda and the New Georgia Project, which was founded by Stacey Abrams. We won that court case because they tried to stop us from doing citizenship verification before people were put on the voter rolls. We won that court case, and because we won that court case, we put an end to it in Georgia. But also, any other state that gets sued can use us as, an example, as a precedent to make sure you can check your voter
We were
rolls.
both going to jump in.
Go ahead.
I've got good news for everyone. All of us want to make sure only U.S. citizens are voting in our elections, and all of us follow the law, ensure the federal provisions are protected, and that we're ensuring that only valid votes are counted in our state. So we're all committed to that, and I think it's really important for folks to know that regardless of our party affiliation, we're doing all that we can and more to ensure, as the facts show in all of our states, that only U.S. citizens are voting.
But the key point you just said, though, was federal provisions. There's no provision for state law other than state law. And so states really should put in their constitution, like the state of Georgia, I've asked them to do, make sure that only American citizens are voting in any election in your state.
Secretary I think Secretary Raffensperger, you proved the point with the statement you made. You did an audit, and you found that there were attempts, but none of those folks were actually registered, and none of those folks actually voted. And that means that elections have been safe and secure from non-citizen voting in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Arizona, and across the country. So I think this is a red herring. I think there's already a law against this. But Arizona, by the way, we've had no citizen voting law on the books for a long time. We actually have a separate ballot for folks who are federal-only voters. Our standards are higher than everybody else's, but we've still got folks making crazy allegations that they're not. So, we really have to look at the facts.
Quick response, is it a red herring? I want to get to AI, something I know you all want to weigh in on.
Absolutely not, because you look at already, there's the left-wing groups trying to get non-citizens voting in local elections in Washington, D.C., New York City, and in other places. And so if people really truly believe this, then why are we getting sued by the left to stop us from doing citizenship verification?
What is clear is this will continue to be a topic of debate. I want to get to AI.
So yeah, that was the final newsmaker clip. You can let me know what you think about how that plays into the Trump voting is rigged meme. Here we have Cheech. You saw Chong at the beginning. Cheech has come to join us at the end. for the bonus clip where you mostly see Cheech here, although you see part of Chong in a kind of cute moment I captured of them playing on a windowsill partly behind the shutter over here. I like how Cheech looks right at the camera there at the end. You want to look at the camera? That's kind of their antics. And so, yeah, we adopted Cheech and Chong in the beginning of December. They came from the shelter with siblings named Cheech and Chong, and they're growing. They're also good at-home viewers, my live studio audience. They, as you see, wander in. Cheech has too much fluff, and anyway, I hope you appreciate the time and effort I put into picking out all the clips, adding my media criticism, political commentary, and legal analysis. And I will be back next Monday and every Monday all the way through January 2025 to continue giving my Monday media mix-ups. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next Monday, unless I have some other reason to upload a video. Oh, hello, Lulu girl. Good to see you. I hope some viewers who don't get to see it live got to see it live, and maybe I'll have some people who normally watch it live who are recorded show viewers. Let me know if you make it all the way to the end and you're a very loyal viewer. And anyway, until next week, or until I have some other reason to upload a video, Cheech and I guess, will just be seeing you around the internet.